And I've still got some of the best minds, best journalists in town to comment what's been making news around the world. Some of you are laughing, some of you are not. That means Anne-Elisabeth Moutet agrees with me that she's one of the best journalists in town, which I think is fair enough. So we've got Craig Capitas, correspondent at large for Quartz, the Atlantic Group. Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, columnist, The Sunday Telegraph. Thank you. Vivienne Walt, contributor for Time Magazine, and Judah Grunstein, editor-in-chief of the World Politics Review. Now, one of the major news stories, certainly here in France and for all French news outlets, has been the official state visit of François Hollande, the French president, to former colony Algeria. And the much anticipated speech by the French president in front of the Algerian lawmakers was always going to center on the words, the carefully chosen words that François Hollande was going to choose to try and soothe the relationship between France and Algeria, which has been tense since the last 50 years of Algerian independence. Let's listen to the French president. Let's listen to what he had to say to Algerian lawmakers.
Algeria, for 132 years, was subject to a profoundly unjust and brutal system. It was colonialism. And I recognize here the suffering that colonialism inflicted on the Algerian people.
2 sentences, just a few words, and yet that's what a lot of Algerian people were waiting to hear. It's not the sorry that some Algerians had been waiting for. They were hoping the French president would repent for crimes committed by the French army during the independence war in Algeria. But this is going a little bit further than previous presidents had done in recognizing French crimes and Algerian suffering. Anne-Elisabeth Moutet.
And still, there's a feeling that all this has been said so often, so many times in France since the end of not the end of the Algerian War, but in the past about 20 years when it became the done thing to go and apologize for everything. It's a very strange and unhealthy relationship that France has with Algeria in some ways. It is a very important country for France because France has got several millions of her citizens who are of Algerian origin, who fought, incidentally, on either side of the independence war. And it's also important right now for François Hollande because Algeria is sitting on the second largest gas reserves in the world. And France needs to do business, and Algeria is in dire need of infrastructure. And we could provide if only they would let us do it. And therefore, the president goes and he makes the speech. The speech is not terribly popular in France, and the way it's been contradicted right now by leaders of the opposition is in itself also going to sort of lead to more complaints. But it's not looking forward, it's looking backwards, and it's looking backwards in a way sort of forgetting lots of things, forgetting the fact that there's no democrat. What's really sad is that the War of Independence, which was really a popular war in Algeria, did not lead to a democratic regime in Algeria at all. Is that they haven't got free elections, is that they've got political prisoners, they've really got
that's
corruption.
Something that got very little, in fact, no mention at all.
No mention at all. Also,
trip.
no mention at all that if we're talking about victims and atrocities, what the French did, which we may or may not be proud of, is dwarfed by the amount of suffering and death meted out during the civil war of the 1990s in Algeria. Not a word about this.
The independence war, by the way, just so we understand what the magnitude of things, is up to 1 million people killed. That's the independence war between France and Algeria.
That's between 1954 and 1962,
yeah.
Yes.
Judah.
Well, what I was going to say is that in a sense, I think that it's not for the French president really to go to Algeria and call out the Algerian government on the atrocities that it has committed in light of the atrocities that the French committed in Algeria. It's for the Algerian people to do that, and it's for France to try and help the Algerian people be able to do that. How it can do that is very complicated.
So for you, it's a non-issue that he didn't mention the failings of the Algerian democracy.
It's not that it's a non-issue. It shows the limits of what a French president could do. It's typical of all of Africa. Every French president comes into office saying, "I'm going to modernize relations with Africa. I'm going to get rid of all the patronage relationships," and they never do because they don't really. There are limits to what they can accomplish. The same thing goes with Algeria. We were talking before the show about Israel-Palestine and how it's a zero-sum conflict down to the last comma. When you're walking on eggshells about every word, it's generally a sign that the conflict is not over. There's so much that has not been said in France and in Algeria The Algerians can't say it. The French won't say it. That the conflict is not over, and so it's very hard to turn the page.
But I would argue that it's precisely because the Algerians are not managing their country properly that the conflict is not over. Because if you look, for instance, at Britain and China and India, that conflict is very well over. In many ways, Indians are buying up companies in Britain, and there's no problem of pride, of apologies.
There's no latent tension there.
Exactly. And it's more a question, I would really sort of, I don't know how somebody like François Hollande could do it, the president of France, but there's really a question to be asked is, who is responsible for this dragging on? And I would say that the fact that there has been no democracy and no progress, this should be a rich country, it is a poor country, it has immigrants, it has infrastructure. There was a blackout in a whole region of Algeria a couple of years back. We found out that the electrical grid had not been changed since 1962 when the French left.
And the majority of the Algerian population, we've been commenting on that with our international affairs editors here on France 24. They were saying that the majority of the Algerian population is actually under 30, and for them the main issue, and this I suppose goes in your direction, is jobs and visas to go to France rather than. I
mean, it seems to me
like
if
they had jobs in
Algeria,
really very much.
Well, it seems to me very much like this was a trade mission dressed up as a presidential visit.
Oh, so he was there to do business after all.
He was there to sign deals for French businesses. And in a sense, that is the colonial relationship. It's still the colonial relationship. He was not there, in a sense, as equals. But, when Judah says, well, it's not his role to intervene in issues of, like, the fact that this is not a democratic country, just think back 2 years ago to Michel Ayoub-Marie going to Tunisia.
French defense minister at the time.
The French defense minister at the time, and how unbelievably embarrassing that was when the country exploded just weeks later. Now, it doesn't look like Algeria is on the verge of explosion, but what if it were?
But it doesn't look like Tunisia is on the way to democracy.
All of that is why France is not a credible advocate, because France was complicit with all of these regimes for the last 40 years, and this is why
but it is a good moment for them to stand up and in diplomatic terms say...
President Hollande went there hoping for, an only Nixon can go to China moment. That's what he was looking at. And what it ended up is Barbar goes to an uncomfortable dinner party moment.
Yes.
That's precisely what happened here. This again shows the vapidity of the president of France. He did go there on a trade mission, and what does he bring them? He brings them a Renault factory. Ooh, that's really exciting. He needs their natural gas.
And that was contentious, by the way. It took a lot of horse trading to get that done.
Yeah, to get it. And I don't, Renault is not one of there were other things that could have been done. He's there to get their natural gas, because most of their natural gas and mineral and resources are going elsewhere. They're not going to France. France sees Algeria as its main trading partner, and that's what they want. And Judah, I think you're absolutely on the money when you say it's this walking on eggshells. That's precisely what it is.
One other thing too, and this in a little bit of fairness to Hollande.
A little bit.
This is not an easy issue. I mean, you look at what Sarkozy did with the southern Mediterranean for his. He launched the
Union of the Mediterranean countries.
And it was a great idea, very poorly followed up on, and a great idea poorly implemented.
Essentially, it doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't exist because politically, politically there wasn't the follow through, and it wasn't possible. The region, the possibilities for creating links between Southern Europe and the Southern Mediterranean, they make perfect sense on paper. But when it comes time to trying to get people to sit around the table and work together on it, it's very complicated.
And when Angela Merkel is against it, it's very complicated.
Okay, guys, another story that's been making news here in France and abroad has been centered on French acting legend icon Gérard Depardieu. Why? Because he decided to throw in the towel here in France. He said, I'll give back my French nationality. I'll go and take another one. I'll move abroad. He's been apparently making plans to buy a house in Belgium. Other countries have been mentioned as well, Montenegro. The reason being, Gérard Depardieu, who's very rich, is fed up of paying extremely high taxes. And in particular, François Hollande, when he came to power, said, okay, as of now, the income above $1 million is going to be taxed at 75%. So Gérard Depardieu wrote an open letter in the French press saying, I'm leaving because I paid 85% tax on my income. 85% tax, and Gérard Depardieu is leaving. Anne-Elisabeth, what do you make of that? Is that normal? Because he got slammed. This is the other part of the story. He got slammed by the Prime Minister, who said it was pathetic.
Who said he was a pathetic loser. And what was very interesting is I was watching the online polls on this one, because you have lots of people attacking, piling on Depardieu in the media. But I was looking at that poll day after day at Le Parisien, and 70% of the people were supporting Depardieu. Depardieu is not Bernard Arnault. Bernard Arnault is the richest man in France, soon to be one of the richest men in Belgium. He is the chairman of LVMH, the luxury conglomerate.
I think he's being turned down. I think today's news is being turned down by Belgium.
That is not working out so well. But anyway, when Bernard Arnault left, there was a feeling that this was a rich capitalist and he was not playing the game and he owed a lot to France. He really had started with government aid to build up, to asset strip an old textile group and then to build up from there. Gérard Depardieu, everybody knows that this is a working class boy who started working, as he writes in his letter, age 14, as a printer, and then as a handyman, and then he became an actor, and he has been in something like 180 movies and made-for-television movies, 170 feature films.
And his financial assets go well beyond the money he gets from his movies, because he's got vineyards, he's got real estate, he's got restaurants.
He's got restaurants. And he's got houses. But this is somebody who basically built it. And he said, over the past 45 years, I have paid 145 million euros in tax. And last year, it was 85% of my income. I've had it. I'm going.
Which, from what I've seen, one of the takeaways is that he's got a very bad accountant. There
is some poetic license in saying he paid 85% of his income.
I think he adds the social levies of the people he employs, and he employs about 80 people.
It's a special way of counting, yeah.
If you look at least what's been reported about how he runs his businesses, also he's a very generous boss. He's a very social. It's almost like an American version of social welfare, where it's in the private sector. Mm-hmm. He gives generously to his employees. He's just
who defended him in the press.
Absolutely. For me, what's interesting about this, though, is that today also there was an article in the Washington Post about a lot of the Spanish and Greek engineers that are moving to Germany to get jobs in Germany, and how it's causing problems in Germany. Even though they're having trouble filling those jobs, but the people that are coming are being resented by Germans, and what strikes me is how really durable the national boundaries are in Europe compared to, say, the United States, where the idea of moving to another state, even if if you live near a border between two states, Texas, for instance, doesn't have state income tax, and if you want to move to Texas and work across the state border, no one is going to think twice about that. They're going to think it's a smart move. Here, as much as Europe is trying to move towards integration and trying to move towards a more European identity, those national borders are still indelible.
Well, no, but you have to.
Vivian, would you pay 75% when you earn your first million, if you haven't already done so? Would you pay 75% of all that money that you earn above €1 million?
It's a totally logical choice to think of moving to a lower income place, and it just seems to me like this country cannot afford to write off its rich, just as they can't afford to write off its poor. This. Basically, it's more. This issue goes way beyond Depardieu. It goes towards a whole feeling right now that wealth is somehow a kind of something suspicious. And
it's old. It's Marxist and Catholic. It's those two strains in the French psyche, and that's centuries old.
Monsieur Hollande est Marxiste, mais non. Look, you know what? This is bad. This is the worst thing to happen to President Hollande this year, this whole Depardieu mess. One, because of that poll Anne-Elisabeth was mentioning. And he has a right to go wherever he wants to go. But this is transmitting a message to the young people of France who are leaving in droves. And I could dig up the statistics.
This is not the right place to make your money.
Yeah, there's no growth here. There's no future here. I mean, you look. It's just not the place. It not only is that, but I see more and more French students getting ready for university, looking to the United States and elsewhere because they see no future here. And this is the real problem. It's just not a problem of no growth and no investment. France is losing its intellectual capital for the future.
But it's been that way for a while. There's been a brain drain in terms of the creative, yes. And it reminds me of what I always considered George W. Bush's most brilliant comment. There's no word in French for entrepreneur.
Yeah. It was actually very true.
But the fact is that's been the case for France. That's been the case for France for years. Creative people who have a new way of doing things, who want to innovate, go elsewhere.
Well, Silicon Valley is full of them.
Exactly.
Hey guys,
Hollywood.
By the way, we've got just under 2 minutes left on this show, and before it's over, I really wanted to thank all of you, because it's about 8 o'clock Paris time on Friday evening, meaning that when you agreed to come on set today, you knew, if you've been reading the papers, that by this time the world was supposed to have ended, okay?
Are we out of the
and you had agreed to spend your last moments with me and with us and with our viewers. So thank you. Of course, it hasn't. Surprise, surprise. Our correspondents are right there in France, in southern France, in the Pyrenees, on the mountain of Boureaus, which was supposed to be one of the last remaining places to survive on Earth. After the end of the world. It was predicted, according to some, by the Mayan civilization, which is actually a poor reading of their calendar. Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, really quickly, is there anything that really scares you?
I really was looking forward to the zombie apocalypse. I mean, it's not going to happen. I feel really, I feel cheated on this one. You can't trust the Mayas.
There was a great cartoon in The Economist this week. It had to do with the Euro crisis, but I think it applies to this story too. It's a guy holding a sign that says, "The end is here." And on the sign, "here" is crossed out, and above it's written, "postponed."
Vivienne, anything that really scares you?
Maybe this is the end of the world. Maybe we're living through it.
Oh, maybe we've just got the wrong time zone. Okay, we'll see.
Into your earpiece, or maybe no one's out there anymore.
Okay, maybe when we step out, there'll be nothing left. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us here on Set for the World this week. Thank you for watching us. We'll be back at the top of the hour with more news. Bye-bye.